Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Daniel Kalenda. Any of you who know me and follow my channel, you're probably thinking, this is unusual. What is Daniel doing, broadcasting? You're not doing that very often these days. And you would be right. I've been trying to stay off of social media, partly for my own sanity, as some of you can probably understand, and partly because I'm on vacation. But we have a very special and a very exciting announcement that we want to make today. And so I decided to take a little break to come back from my hiatus and to tell you guys about some really incredible things that are going on. I'm just trying to follow along with the broadcast here. It's good to see so many of you on. Victor, Imasco, John, Robin Patterson, Ashish Paul, Mike Layard. I can tell by some of the names that we're literally getting you guys logging in from all over the world. I see Russ Benson is on there, and Joel Crumpton. How you doing, Joel? We are going to talk about a few exciting things today. This is not going to be a very long broadcast, but I really want to encourage you to share this. Just click that share button right now. Let all of your friends know about this because something very exciting is in the works, and we want you all to know about it. So I hope that you're all doing well wherever you are in the world today. I have obviously friends all over the place, all different continents. In fact, I just saw Emily Bridgeland on there, who's watching from Australia, and Siegfried Tomaszewski, I think he's probably watching from South Africa. And I know there are so many different requirements, lockdown things happening in different countries all over the world, and I know many of you are getting absolutely sick of it. I can tell you I'm over this thing. I don't think I've been on a plane in, 3 months, something like that, which is really unusual for me, but we have been staying busy here at Christ for All Nations. I thought when this whole COVID-19 thing started and basically every large event, which is bread and butter for us, when that all started getting canceled, I thought, I'm going to have a vacation here. And I was trying to hide my excitement about having a little bit of time off. Well, that has turned out to not be anywhere near the case. For one thing, just all of the online stuff, the Zoom meetings and the interviews on Facebook Live and Instagram and all these different platforms, for a while there, for a few weeks, were absolutely dominating my time to the point I had to start saying I can't do any more of these. But even more importantly, we've been involved with something that we're calling the Evangelism Bootcamp, which took place from January, just ended a few weeks ago. We had 54 students that were here in Orlando for 6 months, and we were just investing into them and pouring into them, and it was a really amazing time. And a lot of people have been saying, well, what's next, especially for the boot camp, for the strategy of the decade of double harvest, for this entire vision that the Lord has given. And I know many of you have heard about this now for months or even for a couple of years, and you're wondering what's coming next. Well, I want to tell you what's coming next. And in just a moment, I'm going to play a little video for you. But I want to start today with a little bit of story time. It was, the year maybe 2008, 2009. I was with Evangelist Reinhard Bonnke in Germany. And we were speaking there at a Pentecostal conference for the BFP. Those of you that are Germans may know about the BFP. But in the morning, I got together with Evangelist Bonnke at breakfast. We were about to go to the meeting, and he was unusually quiet over his breakfast that morning. And I knew something was stirring inside of him, and I just waited to hear what it was. And then he said, I had a dream last night. And my ears perked up because, Evangelist Bonnke was not a prophetic slot machine. He was not the kind of guy that always had a word. If he said the Lord had spoken, then you could take it to the bank because it was a special thing. And so he said, I had a dream last night. In fact, he said, I'm not sure if it was a dream or a vision. I'm not sure if I was asleep or awake. It was so vivid. It was so real. He said, I overheard two personalities talking to one another, and I could hear everything they were talking about. He said, it was as though we had been projected into the future by many years. And he said, I overheard them talking about things that were going on in the world at the time. And one voice was asking questions and the other one was answering. He said they talked about many things happening in the future. But he said one of the most important things, the last thing they talked about was this. One of those voices asked, whatever happened to the great evangelist Reinhard Bonnke, whatever became of him? And the answer was this: oh, Reinhard Bonnke, he was just the forerunner of a whole new generation of Holy Spirit evangelists. And he woke up. And he was shaken by this dream. He shared it with me at breakfast, and then that evening when he spoke in the conference, he shared it again. And he said that he envisioned a day that would come when even in Germany, the streets would be flooded with young people that were preaching the gospel and seeing signs and wonders and miracles, a wave, a movement of evangelism touching the nations of the world. And, you know, this burden on Evangelist Bonnke's heart really characterized the tone and the content of his preaching for, I don't know, the last 3 or 4 years of his life. Some of you may know about how we went to Lagos, Nigeria, and he had his last crusade in Africa. It was called his farewell crusade in Africa. But the theme of the fire conference was passing the torch. Now, I think a lot of people thought of that as being some sort of statement about him passing the leadership of the ministry to me. But I had already been the leader of CfaN for, 10 years or something like that. It wasn't about me. It was about him sensing the need to pass on this baton of the gospel, this torch of evangelism to the next generation. And he often preached about this. He would often preach in those last couple of years of his life. He would talk about that time that he had an encounter with a great evangelist in the United Kingdom, George Jeffreys. And I know many of you have heard that story, how he actually got lost in London and stumbled upon the house of George Jeffreys, who was a great evangelist that shook the United Kingdom. And George Jeffreys prayed for him and imparted something to him and then died just a few years later. And Reinhard always talked about that and said, I was already filled with the Holy Spirit, but I caught something, an impartation, a mantle of some kind. And he wanted to, in the latter years of his life, pass something on to the next generation. And I believe that Evangelist Bonnke had in his spirit and in his mind a desire for something that the Lord had not given him the pattern or the strategy how to implement. But I believe that he's given it to us. And so, I came in as the leader of Christ for All Nations, like I said, about 10 years ago now. And I was a 28-year-old at the time, which is kind of crazy to think, taking over a ministry that had offices in 10 different countries and 5 different continents. It was a daunting task, and I often prayed. I said, Lord, why did you give this assignment to me? You could have picked anybody. And what I felt in my heart was that what he had called me to was not just merely to fill the shoes of Reinhard Bonnke. People always said to me, how do you ever expect to fill Reinhard Bonnke's shoes? And I always said, I don't. I only intend on filling my own shoes. But somehow I even knew in my heart that that was not my calling anyway, was just to fill Reinhard Bonnke's shoes and just to perpetuate his ministry for another generation, just to have a nice salary and a comfortable ministry position and a great platform. None of that was the purpose or the reason that God had called me to this. And what the Lord showed me, this was in 2017 already, that what was coming was going to be a decade of double harvest. And what that meant for me is that what we had seen in the last 30 years God would so multiply and so speed up time that we would see those same results happen in the next 10 years. And by the way, those first 30 years, we saw 75 million people make documented decisions for Christ. And so what I felt in my heart is that over the next 10 years, that number is going to go to 150 million and beyond. I knew it from the Lord. It was one of those things that the Lord speaks and you just know in your heart. You know that this is what God is saying. But the Lord also said this to me, that this result, this exponential increase, was not going to come through addition. It wasn't just that I was going to be a better preacher than Reinhard or something. That was never what I thought was going to happen. But I sensed the Lord saying this will not come through addition, but through multiplication. And so with that little introduction, I want to share now with you something very exciting. This is what this live broadcast is all about. This is why I came back early from my vacation to share this with you, because this is the crux. This is the core. This is the heart of the vision that God has given us. It revolves around this thing called the Evangelism Bootcamp. And now you are going to have an opportunity to be involved in this and to be, by extension, involved in the greatest season of harvest that has ever happened in the history of the world. Are you ready? Watch this.
My whole life has changed because of this boot camp.
I've been trained. I feel like that I've been equipped by one of the most amazing evangelists and teachers.
It starts with the ins and outs of how an evangelistic ministry runs. We have been a part of many international meetings with executives, and we could just sit in and observe how they make decisions.
This is so much more than a Bible school. This is like the Navy SEALs for evangelists. It's an exceptionally demanding program in every way, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, even physically. We have students graduating in the best shape of their lives. It's intensely practical. It's theologically rigorous. We're holding students to the highest standards, and it's definitely not for the faint of heart. But for those who graduate, it's life-changing.
The intimacy and fellowship with the Lord, all the while, activating your gifts and your calling is just absolutely amazing.
The wisdom, the experience that has been accumulated here, to me, it's something that we can learn from, and you will be able to learn from it too.
Really just taking me back to that secret place, and basing my entire ministry off of Jesus.
Not many people are doing it like this, and more importantly, even less people are willing to lift the curtain, so to speak.
I've never seen a program that offers the kind of opportunities that the boot camp offers. Even the instructors, the mentors, the coaches, pouring out their lives every day into these students. They're some of the most successful and experienced evangelists in the world. And we give the students the behind-the-scenes view of the ministry so that they can build for themselves solid ministries with firm foundations that will produce fruit that remains.
Every single instructor that taught us have pointed us to the feet of Jesus, and it's really the foundation and the overflow that everything else needs to come out of.
It'd be like if you were starting a shoe company and Nike called you up and they said, hey, Phil Knight wants to teach you how to make running shoes. It'd be equivalent to that. Nike is the best at what they do, and CfaN's the best in evangelism in the earth.
How to pray for the sick, how to pray for the baptism of the Holy Spirit, onto crusade organizing, how to bring churches together.
Life is going to be instilled into you, and you're going to be tested and tried in every corner.
I can say with this one phrase, it was life-changing in so many ways.
Organizing, of setting up events, of knowing a lot of the practicalities, and now I am equipped and ready to go to the field.
Here is the place where I have found the complete fullness of who I am as an evangelist.
After graduation, we don't just shake their hands and wish them well. We stay connected and offer them ongoing training, collaboration, credentialing, and on-the-field support. When you graduate from boot camp, you belong to a tribe. You belong to a family. And we work together, we strategize together, we collaborate together, and we move together to reap a harvest and to produce fruit that's greater than any of our ministries could do on our own.
Look into the eyes of Jesus, and if you're called to be an evangelist, and especially into mass evangelism, I just want to challenge you, take that step of faith, come and be transformed in these few months here at Christ for All Nations.
Hello everyone, this is Daniel Kalenda, and if your heart is burning as you watch this, I want to invite you to go and find out more about the Christ for All Nations Boot Camp and how you can be part of a strategy to reach 1 billion people with the gospel. If God has called you, now is the time to answer the call. Go to CfaNBootcamp.org right now. Now in the future, a 2-year training is going to be required before boot camp. But right now we're looking for a very small and a very special group of people to fast track to the harvest field. Again, we're not looking for big numbers here. We're looking for the right people that are called to evangelism and willing to lay down their lives for the gospel. If you believe that you're one of those, go to CfaNBootcamp.org right away. The next class starts in January in Orlando, Florida, and we have compressed the program into 3 very intense months. There's an amazing story behind the development of all this, and when you go to CfaNBootcamp.org, you can watch the informational video about boot camp, and if you want to hear even more, scroll down a little farther and watch the video called A Tale of 3 Dreams. You can find out all the information you need and register right there at cfanbootcamp.org. I'll see you soon. Well, is your heart burning? I know that mine is, even just sitting there watching that promo. By the way, that's the first time that promo has been released to the public, so you kind of got live the sneak preview of that. I'm looking here at the live feed, and I'm seeing many of the graduates that are watching right now. Kathy, Matthias, Beulah's watching. Hi, Beulah. Terrell is on. I saw Evelina, Dennis, Matthias. So good to see all of you guys and many, many more. I tell you, Jake Tichy is watching. Any of these graduates, if you ask them what the boot camp was like, they're going to tell you that it changed their lives. And in fact, I'm going to introduce you to some of those graduates in just a few moments. I don't call them students anymore. They're graduates, and they are evangelists. And God is using them and is going to continue to use them in just such incredible ways. But I want to tell you, we haven't even opened this up yet. We haven't even announced the next boot camp, and we've already got, I think, half the class full. We only have room for about 100 students. We do that intentionally. We could have thousands, but we try to keep it personal and small and intimate. We want to be able to pour in to the students' lives. And so it is possible that before the day is over, that the school is going to be full. So I would just encourage you, if you're burning for this, if you feel like this is something that you want to take advantage of, I wouldn't wait. I would get in on this right away. Once again, the website is CfaNbootcamp.org. That's CFAN, that stands for Christ for All Nations, CFAN Bootcamp, all one word, .org. That's where you can find out more information. You can find out what the classes are going to be like, what the schedule's going to be like. You can find out the costs that are involved, the time frame. Like I said in the video, we've actually taken a program that eventually is going to be 2 years. And the last boot camp, the first class that we did, it took 6 months. We've compressed it into 3 months. I don't know if it will ever be offered that way again. And so once again, it will be 3 months that will change your life and propel you out to the harvest fields and make you a part of a family, because that's really how I see the boot camp and all of us, the graduates, the instructors, the coaches, the mentors. We are a family, and we're doing this thing together. I know that this is going to be a great blessing to you. Now, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to share a little bit about the Decade of Double Harvest, and then I'm going to play another short video for you with a little bit more information. We're going to put some meat on the bones. You might be very excited about this, but you need to know a little bit more about what this is all about. We're going to share that with you in a moment, and then when we come back from this next video, I'm going to be here with half a dozen of the graduates of the boot camp, the last boot camp. These are men and women of God. They are incredible, incredible people. And I'm going to ask them some questions, but I'm also going to give you the opportunity as the viewer to ask questions of me, of them, about the boot camp, about the Decade of Double Harvest, about Christ for All Nations, the initiative that we are involved in that I believe will culminate in 1 billion people or more getting saved. And we'll talk about that later on in the broadcast today. This is not going to be a long live broadcast. I didn't come on here to do a 3-hour television show or something. I just want to get the word out. I want to make this announcement so that those of you who want to get in on this next boot camp starting in January of 2021, you can register now. You can begin to get things in order to make that move to Orlando. The time is very short. So if you have questions, please begin to go ahead and send those questions in right now. We have some of our volunteers are standing by. They're collecting those questions, and they'll be giving those to me. A few points very quickly. One more time, CfaNbootcamp.org is the website. If you don't want to wait till the end of this broadcast, you want to go ahead and get registered, that's probably what I would do. You can do that right now at CfaNbootcamp.org. The capacity is very small. We're upping it from the 50 or so that we had in the first class to about 100, which is going to be pressing our capacity here, but we felt from the Lord to go ahead and do that. But still, we've almost filled half the school already, and we haven't even announced it yet. So go ahead and get that in. Also, just to reiterate some of the things you may have seen in that video, but they didn't register with you. One of the ongoing benefits of the boot camp for graduates is that we remain connected as a team, as a community, working together in an ongoing way. We are already getting ready to offer ordination, ministerial ordination to our graduates. We offer them the opportunity to have ongoing coaching, education, mentoring, connection with their trainers, their coaches, connection with each other, doing events and outreaches together. Because this is really one of the purposes of boot camp, is that it brings all of these people with a similar interest together so that they can begin to collaborate and synergize and have even greater exponential impact, so that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And of course, there's a whole lot more. I wish I had time to tell you, but what we're going to do right now is, while you're sending in those questions, we're going to go to this video that's going to give you a little bit more information, and when we come back, we're going to answer your questions together in the studio. Watch this. Hello, everybody. This is Evangelist Daniel Kalenda. If you are called into evangelism, especially mass evangelistic crusades in the nations, listen up. What I'm about to share with you is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that will never come around again. A couple of years ago, the Lord gave me a vision for a decade of double harvest. Maybe you've seen that slogan on shirts or other promo material, but let me take a moment to explain exactly what the decade of double harvest means to me. In 1987, our ministry, Christ for All Nations, started tracking new converts that were being saved in our gospel crusades. This was necessary because we implemented a new follow-up system that was designed to usher these new converts into local churches. We wanted them to be discipled because Jesus didn't say go and make converts, he said go and make disciples. Now, since that time, we've counted 79 million registered decisions for Christ. This is surely one of the greatest seasons, if not the single greatest season of harvest in the history of the world. What I believe that the Lord showed me with the decade of double harvest is that, as amazing as those previous results were, this next season would be even greater. In fact, we would literally double the harvest in the next decade. In other words, we would see as many people saved over the next 10 years as we saw in the first 30 years combined, bringing that number of new converts to well over 150 million. Now, maybe you wonder, how is this possible? Our Christ for All Nations team worldwide is already stretched almost to the breaking point. Doubling our work would be impossible. But what I sensed from the Lord was that this increase would come not through addition, but through multiplication. So for the last couple of years, I've been training men and women with a burning heart for evangelism to go out, preach the gospel, heal the sick, cast out demons, and bring the kingdom of heaven wherever they go. But that's not all. We aren't just equipping them. For a few, we're also giving them a platform on the field and providing them with all the tools necessary to do the actual work. And the results have been astonishing. I don't have time to describe the whole strategy at the moment, but let me give you one example of a way that we provide a platform for these evangelists. In Africa, our talented team of world-class technicians has built a fleet of custom-made mobile crusade units, affectionately known as gospel trucks. These are designed to give our evangelists a platform in the most unusual places. They preach in villages, markets, schools, prisons, orphanages, and street corners, basically anywhere and everywhere. And these outreaches happen strategically for several weeks leading up to one of our mass gospel crusades. It's important to understand that these are not just hit and run evangelistic outreaches. Our gospel trucks are connected with the main crusades organizing team so that each village outreach has participating churches where new converts can be discipled, ushers, counselors. They preach with interpreters. They're partnered with local pastors, and sometimes they even have local worship teams cooperating. These are literally little crusades that happen all over the place. Just to give you an example of how this works, our last crusade was in Nakuru, Kenya. More than a third of the population of the entire city showed up to our last night of crusade meetings there. It was amazing. But even before I arrived, for 7 weeks leading up to the crusade, we had a team of 4 evangelists on the ground conducting up to 32 outreaches per day. Over those 7 weeks prior to the crusade, they ministered in more than 600 outreaches and led more than 200,000 people to Christ. Some of the experiences they had were wild. They had situations in public schools where the power of God swept through the school. Hundreds of students were laid out on the ground under the power of God, receiving the baptism of the Holy Spirit. Other students were dramatically delivered of demon possession in the principal's office of a public school. Again, when I talk about outreaches, I'm not talking about just one-on-one witnessing, although that's always a part of what we do. But when I talk about outreaches, I'm talking about radical, full-blown crusade evangelism with signs and wonders and a massive harvest of souls that leads into local churches. When I sat with those 4 evangelists when I arrived in Nakuru, they were still stunned by what had happened. In 7 weeks, they had led more people to Christ than most do in an entire ministry career. And they were able to do it all because they had been equipped with the right tools and given a platform to use those tools. The results were dramatic, and we're seeing this happening again and again. And here's why I'm telling you this. Over the next 10 years, as part of the Decade of Double Harvest, I plan to train, equip, and launch 20,000 evangelists in this same fashion. Some of them will go on to be the next Reinhard Bonnke's and Billy Grahams of the next generation. Those 20,000 students will be required to go through 1 to 2 years of training. However, before that program starts, I'm looking for a small, elite group to train this coming year. I'm talking about this coming January. It's a fast track to the field for a very small, very special group of people. If you're interested in this, I mean, if you're really, really serious, I mean, if you're ready to go and lay down your life for the gospel and pay any price, I want to hear from you. This is not for those looking for an ordinary ministry school or wanting to just learn about the Bible. This is not going to be a 6-month conference where you get good teaching and soak. There's nothing wrong with those things, but this is going to be an intense training for evangelists who burn to touch the world with the gospel. That's what I'm looking for. If that's you, use that contact information on your screen and get in touch with us today. January is fast approaching, so do not delay. So I'm here with some of the graduates of the boot camp, the very first boot camp. Yes. So you guys will have the blessing of always, no matter how many students come through boot camp, and there will be thousands at some point, you guys will represent the very first pioneer class. Yeah. So you'll always be very special to me, very dear to my heart. But I wanted to give you a chance as the viewers watching this. Maybe some of you are finding out about this for the first time. Maybe you've heard about what was happening in the past, but you didn't realize there was going to be another opportunity to be a part of this. I want you to have the chance to ask us questions, to ask them questions, and to get a little bit more clarity. I would love to start with you, Evan, because you've been doing something really interesting just since the graduation. You were actually a part of that I don't even know what you call it, that independent nation that was set up in the middle of Seattle called CHAZ.
Yeah, we a week after graduation, a friend of mine was in prayer, and he heard the Lord say, Seattle, Seattle. And so we planned a trip to the CHAZ zone. And within a couple days, we were there. We had a tent set up right in the middle of this very tense zone that was incredibly just...
For those that might not know what that is.
Yeah, I mean...
Because not everybody watches the news.
Yeah, I mean, it was all over the news, but essentially there was some political groups that started this zone. They kicked out the police, and there was a lot of racial tension, and we felt like this was the perfect opportunity to bring the gospel. And honestly, before the boot camp, I could not have seen myself going into such a place. But after the boot camp, we couldn't wait, and we knew that we had what it took. So we were there within a week. We had a tent set up. We connected with like 5 different churches. God provided food to hand out, and I was amazed at just the connections that we made through the boot camp and the skills that we had developed the last 6 months to do such a thing.
That's real. So what comes to the surface as something that really you got in boot camp that made you more effective in that environment?
I feel honestly like I picked up a gift of faith.
Wow.
Because seeing you talk about faith and just seeing your lifestyle, that really boosted our faith to go and do it in the first place. But also, we saw well over 50 salvations. We baptized people. And before this trip, I had 0 logistical skills. I mean, literally, I couldn't set up anything for my life. But after the boot camp, I literally planned the whole trip from beginning to end. and connected with all the churches, which I discovered learned the value of through the boot camp. And so it taught me the skills of how to pioneer and go into places that few others would be willing to go.
And that's a really interesting point, because there are a lot of Bible schools out there, and I have no desire and had no desire to start a Bible school. If you want basic theology, you want Old and New Testament survey, you want to learn about math, English, read literature like that, you can do that a lot of different places. What we wanted to do was to create a boot camp, a school that would help evangelists to have the skills, more like a trade school, to have the specific skills that they need to go to the nations, and not just to be able to minister one-on-one, although that's also good, and we always want that to be a lifestyle for us. But we also wanted to be equipped to pass on what CfaN does so well, what CfaN knows, which is these large-scale evangelistic outreaches. And of course, we haven't been able to do that actually over the last several months because of all the pandemic stuff going on, the COVID-19, the lockdowns, the quarantines. Many African countries that we normally do our crusades in, they're not allowed to gather right now. But you guys, I was so proud of you, because you guys, without being prompted by me or encouraged by anybody at CfaN, you guys just took the initiative. You saw an opportunity for the gospel, and you went there and you began to preach the gospel. I saw pictures of you guys baptizing people, people getting demons cast out of them, people receiving Jesus, being healed in the middle of this, I don't even know what to call it, this place where the enemy was just really tormenting people. And what I saw in the news seemed to me like there were a lot of very tormented people there. It seemed to attract a lot of people like that.
There were, and it was just there were a lot of political tensions and different cultural clashes, and we were able to go in there with a spirit of humility and love, because we learned in the boot camp how to connect with different cultures and different people. People were afraid to go in and love on these people, but we went in, and the leaders loved us. The security fell in love with us within the first few days. We were washing their feet. And we literally had favor with the people that everybody was afraid of. And I wouldn't have felt safe going with any other group than a couple other boot camp students, because these guys really are like Navy SEALs for the kingdom. And so I felt totally comfortable going with other boot camp students. And if you want to be a part of this boot camp, I'm telling you, it will train you to go into the places very few are willing to go.
I was so proud of you guys, and I continue to be, just seeing what God's doing in your life. Tori, I wanted to ask you, because we were talking a little bit about this during that video, that you didn't feel before the boot camp, you really didn't feel qualified.
Right.
And I know that will resonate with a lot of people that are watching right now, that maybe their heart burns for this, but they're like, I could never do that. I'm not that person. What do you say to them?
Yeah, honestly, I was a full-time nurse before I applied to the Evangelism boot camp. And when I saw it announced at Light the Fire again last year in Pensacola, something resonated in my spirit that I was so excited, and something was burning inside of me that I'd really never felt before. But it felt so far out of reach, and there's no way somebody like me could pursue something like that. And I honestly held me back for almost a full month before I applied, because I was believing the lie of the enemy that I wasn't qualified to apply, that it was going to be just people who had been in ministry for a really long time, who had been doing crusades. And honestly, I had to overcome that to say, okay, Lord, if you want to use me in this, I'll be obedient to apply and just trust you with the open and closed doors. And one thing that the Lord really taught me, and this is what I would say to you, if you're really excited and something just really is stirring in your spirit right now as you listen to Daniel share his vision and you listen to this video, if something's stirring in your spirit but you feel just really unqualified and it's really far out of reach, I just want to say this to you, and it's something that the Lord really spoke to me. And it's that the Lord is not asking you to be qualified. He's asking you to be obedient. And what he's able to do with your yes is so profound. And so take that risky step of faith and just put yourself out there and watch what the Lord will do with your obedience, because it will honestly blow your mind. And he's a God of abundantly more that we could even ask or imagine. And it's something that I've seen in this season. I never would have pictured myself here a year ago, ever. But yet here I am,
And so before you didn't feel qualified. How do you feel now?
Yeah, now I feel equipped and empowered to go out to the nations. And I had this desire to see souls saved. And I had this desire to go to the nations, but I really didn't know what it looked like, or I didn't have the training behind me to where I felt like I could do that effectively. But here during the Evangelism Boot Camp, honestly, like, it's equipped me and empowered me and instilled in me just coming to Jesus before we are going out into the mission field. But it's through that the Holy Spirit is truly the one that is running through our veins, and he's going to reach the unreachable when we step foot in every nation. And because of the training that I received here, I feel like I'll be able to do that effectively.
Yeah, and I was amazed because we do things in the class, really practical things. Like for example, one of the things that all of you had to do was preaching exhibitions. Outdoors, like actually learning how to project the voice and preach like crusade evangelists to the big crowds. And not everybody is born, not everybody comes out of the womb thinking like that. But one of the things that I saw with you guys, with the boot camp in general, was how people really began to step into that role. And suddenly people that were maybe very timid before, very quiet, soft-spoken people, I suddenly could see them as the next Billy Graham or the next Reinhard Bonnke, like right before our eyes. That transformation was happening. And it's such a thrill. And you know what, the thing that thrills me more than anything is I really feel like this vision that Reinhard had, he could see it with his heart, but he didn't really know how it would ever come about. And I feel like we're living in the fulfillment of that. Much like, Joshua was able to go into the promised land after Moses died. I think that the Lord allows us to go from generation to generation, carrying forward those visions and those dreams that he's given to, fathers and mothers in the faith. And I feel like the gift that was on Evangelist Reinhard Bonnke's life, I see it in you guys. I see that imparted to you. I see it in your ministries. I see it in your spirits, in the way that you talk, in the way that you see the world. And it's really, really exciting. Rosalind, while we're on the subject, I think this is a really good segue.
Yeah, it is.
You also had a medical background, right? You're a medical doctor.
I am.
What is it about boot camp and medical professionals?
Yeah, honestly, it's very similar to what Tori mentioned, because I'm a medical doctor, and it's to see what God has done in bringing me. I could not, when I was, a couple of days ago, Facebook reminded me that I graduated medical school 4 years ago.
Wow.
And I just reshared it, but in my heart, I took a moment to just reflect on what God has done. Because as I was receiving my diploma, the Holy Spirit was telling me that he's sending me to the nations. But I didn't know what that looked like. But now that I'm here, not just here as a team here at Christ for All Nations, but also a graduate of the Evangelism Bootcamp, I can see it. I can see it with everything in me. I know that this decade of double harvest is not just something we're talking about. We will see more than we can possibly even imagine. And that was what was imparted into my heart. And I came in totally feeling like all of these guys probably had, like, they grew up doing ministry and stuff. It's just, I have a medical background, talk science, I get it. But here I've just been imparted to step into all that God has called me to be. It was completely just life-changing. And she's a lady, I'm a lady. And I also feel like I was mentioning to you before when the video was playing, that the applications we're even getting, because as you were talking earlier, you said we're even filling up already, and people need to start applying. And one of the things that stood out to me as from just behind the scenes is a lot of women are also applying for the boot camp.
It's really true.
It's amazing.
And in fact, so Rosalind is actually faculty. It's a really interesting story because you didn't come in as a student. You were part of the staff.
Yes.
And she wanted so much to be a part of the school that she actually ended up graduating. Thank
you so much.
Thank you. It was your passion. You just would not let it go. You were so passionate about it, and I love that. And so you're still working as faculty. And one of the things that Rosalind's involved with is looking at applications. If you send an application, she's going to see it. She's going to be one of the people that, as a gatekeeper to let you through or not. But How many applications did we go over yesterday? I think it was like...
We went through 13 applications that we already interviewed,
Yeah.
and we're submitting our recommendations to you as to...
And we're sitting there talking about these, and there's a whole bunch more we still have to go through.
Yeah.
And I'm saying to them, how do these people even know about... We haven't advertised this yet. The website wasn't working.
Right, yeah.
There was no way to apply. Like, how is this happening?
Yeah.
And so that's why we're telling you, if this is in your heart, you need to do it quick, because we've
Now.
only
Yeah.
got space for 100 people.
Yeah.
And when it's full, it's full. And then we'll have more of these in the future, but there's no guarantees of anything.
Yeah. You have
So
to do it now.
jump on it, jump on it. And I just want to pinpoint something that you said and reiterate it, because there are a lot of ladies that are applying for this, and 2 ladies here, today. And I think that some people, when they picture an evangelist, they think of a Reiner Bonnke, they think of a Billy Graham, a T.L. Osborne, they're all men.
Yeah.
And maybe there's ladies that feel that burning, and they're wondering, can a lady do this? And what do you say?
Absolutely. I would say yes, you can do it. God has called you for such a time as this. One of the things I remember from Evangelist Daniel's session was when you talked to us about Esther, and you used that particular scripture to just remind us that even if we've forgotten, or if we think this is not something we're being involved in, that no, you are called for such a time as this.
Yeah.
God is calling and raising up women evangelists all around the globe. And if you need a training behind you to go for it and go into the harvest field and take it for Jesus, now is the time. You need to apply.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
Go ahead.
No, that's so funny that you said Esther, because honestly, when I was on my way here, I was praying, and the Lord brought to mind Esther and her story.
Yeah.
And I was like, Lord, what do you want to share today? Like, let this be you, Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And he just said, like, I'm raising up Esthers in this generation to step into their calling. But if you don't step into your calling, I will use somebody else.
Yeah.
And it was like a call of the Lord with this urgency. Like, now is the time. If there's ever been a time to preach the gospel, it is right now. In our world, you know? And so step into that calling and fully embrace all that the Lord has for you, because he has called you and he's going to equip you.
And just, staying on the lady thing, just a few more seconds, because I really do feel like, and one of the things we've seen, and I've noticed with the boot camp, with our schools of evangelism, is that there's a whole generation of women that are about to get raised up and sent out.
I believe
but I think that even what this boot camp offers is especially important for ladies. Because, a man can just kind of get up and go and, go somewhere all by himself. And that's a lot more difficult for ladies in the realities of the world. There's one of the ladies who may even be watching, who's a graduate. She went to, I think it was it Tanzania as a missionary, and she had a situation there where she was really taken advantage of, and just basically came back empty and had nothing to offer. It really was a very challenging and trying situation, and she had no one to turn to. And she was telling us this story on one of the last days of our boot camp, and I said to her, that will never happen to you again, because now you're part of a family. And if somebody tries to take advantage of you, you pick up the phone and call, and you're going to have 25 of your brothers or sisters descending like special forces to get you out of there, to help you. And that, to me, is, again, perhaps the greatest thing about this, beyond the education, beyond the equipping, beyond the ordination, beyond the alliances. It's just the fact that we know each other now, and we have a relationship. We're a family. And those rings, how many of you guys are wearing your rings? You guys all got those?
No.
How dare you? No. No, so these are actually, these rings that I'm wearing, I was given this ring by Jerry Hill, who's the wife of the late, great evangelist Steve Hill. And I've treasured this, and I said, you know what I want to do is I want to give one of these to every boot camp graduate. And so all of you guys have one, even if you're not wearing it today. But it's kind of like, I don't know, it's like we're like the Avengers or something. Anyway, it's really cool. Daniel, talk to me a little bit. I want to keep this moving, but you were talking earlier about how you feel what God is doing in evangelism.
Yes, well, I believe that a couple months ago, God gave me a dream. And in this dream, I saw a room full of people, of evangelists wanting to learn. And I saw you in the front of this room, and I saw you very deeply thinking. And your family was next to you. And in the dream, I heard a voice. And the voice was saying, Evangelist Daniel, I'm raising a generation. and you will be father to children that are not your children.
Wow.
And in that moment, the Holy Spirit descended over you, and you started putting fire over us. And I remember you were praying for the room, and it was as far as I could see. It was thousands, if not tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, because there was a part of the room that I could not grasp how much people was there. But I could see that the heart of God is to raise a generation. And I believe that around the world, there is people that God is speaking to them, that is speaking to their hearts, and is saying, you have to raise up. And I believe the bootcamp is the premium training that all of us, we can have to be an evangelist.
Yeah.
I just remember that I have been in training all my life for 5, 6, 7 years. But once I got into the bootcamp, before I learned, for example, about making houses. And you can know all the theory to make a house. But once I was in the bootcamp, they gave me the tools. They put me to work, and they paired me with them. And I just feel that that as an evangelist, now I have the tools. I know how to tell stories. I know how to project my voice.
You do know how to tell stories.
I know how to understand my audience. I know how to even have a right projection from my diaphragm.
Yeah.
So every single detail that I had to learn, I was training the bootcamp. It was like hands-on every single detail, which I'm extremely grateful.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you get out of it what you put into it.
Yeah.
And Daniel, you gave your all. I could see that every single day. And you were one of those I was talking about that I saw you over the course of 6 months really transform into a different person.
Thank you, Daniel. I feel that sometimes I come across as quiet or shy, but inside of me I can feel like a fire that is burning.
Yeah.
And I can attest, if maybe someone behind the screen is saying, I'm shy or I'm timid, many evangelists that I know are timid or they are not extroverts. But I believe that if you have a fire inside of you, this is the place.
Yeah.
This is a place to let it loose.
Yeah.
And you're the best to learn from Evangelist Daniel.
Well, where are you from, Daniel?
I am from Mexico originally, yes.
And Rosalind, where are you from?
I'm from Nigeria.
So the reason I'm asking is because there's a lot of internationals that have asked questions about what about us?
Yeah.
And what do you say, Daniel, to someone who's watching this from another country?
I believe that this is the time. I come from many nations, like the Hispanic nations. I believe that sometimes we don't step ourselves to dream. We tend to be a little bit, no, I have to be behind the scenes. But I believe that from all the corners of the world, God is arising a generation of evangelists that will be fearless. I see that God will take fear away from people from Japan, fear away from people from Pakistan, fear away from people from Nigeria. We will all become one army from all the nations, burning, fearless, ready to bring our Jesus to the nations and ready to show the world that there is a message that they must hear. And I just believe that from all around the nations, I say if you are hearing from a nation and you say, I'm a little thing, I want to tell you, don't look at you as that. Look at yourself as God is calling you. Believe in it. Be one that arise for this occasion because this is the time to take the nations for our Jesus.
Yeah, and there are some countries we are aware that you may not be able to come here for various reasons. And so we are planning to start, and I don't want to say too much about this yet because it's getting ahead of myself, but we're going to have satellite schools in many different countries around the world. So maybe there'll be something coming to a nation near you. But if you can get here this coming January, you need to do it. In fact, if you're from another country, and you come here, you may end up being one of those we send back to your country to help start a satellite school. So please think about that. Randy, I want to just maybe direct some of these questions towards you. These are from people who I guess they're wanting information about the school. And this is a broad question that kind of covers a lot of them. The question is, what will I experience? And so talk a little bit about, as I see it, there's basically 3 or maybe 4 big components. Number one, there's the inner life is what we're calling it, spiritual formation, like the mornings that are spent in prayer and meditation, time with the Lord. Then there's a theological component, there is a ministerial component and there's practical. So can you just talk about from that perspective, like what is the experience if somebody's thinking like, well, I already went to Bible school, or, you know, I don't want to go back to school. I graduated 20 years ago. What is it like?
So I didn't go to medical school.
Me neither.
I didn't even graduate high school. And I was in corporate America, and I started to just go to other countries without knowing anything. So when I came here, I was pretty raw. I didn't know traditional theological things. I didn't know how to do things properly. I didn't know how to plan trips necessarily. I would just kind of go to places. And I knew I needed that. I knew that in order to really be used, that there were these practical things that I needed. But how everything started here with School of Evangelism, we had the SOE, was that everybody points to the feet of Jesus. Yeah. Every speaker, it doesn't matter if it's Brian Guerin, who's a prophet, it doesn't matter if it's you as an evangelist, or Todd White, or Peter Vandenberg, every single one of them said, you must stay at the feet of Jesus. We can teach you everything that you need to know, and you can be successful. You can have big meetings. You can see miracles. You can have these things happen, but if you don't go back to the feet of Jesus, you will be unsatisfied, and eventually you will fall. So every day we would start at 8 in the morning for 2 hours, and we would be at the feet of Jesus. And it was a beautiful thing, and it was so great for me because I learned that there was more ways to go to Jesus than what I knew. Yeah. And so I've been developed in that way. And then as far as theologically, you know, I didn't know anything theologically about evangelism. I knew go do the work of an evangelist. That's what I knew. Yeah. That was it, right? Yeah. But I didn't even know I had done a bunch of very small meetings, evangelistic meetings, you know, outdoor meetings. But until we preached outside, I'd never preached evangelistically. Wow. I'd always just taught. That's all I knew. I didn't even know how to preach evangelistically. So from a practical standpoint and theologically, what am I trying to accomplish? Where does evangelism come from? I learned all of those things here that I didn't know. And it really was. I mean, it was amazing to me. I said to my wife, I said, I've been doing this wrong for 3 years. I mean, by the mercy of God, we've seen some results, but I've been doing it wrong the whole time. And so just things like that. And then really for me, the biggest thing is that as things have ended, what has happened afterwards, the ability to go out and to do and have the support, like Evan was talking about, have the support of those around us, but also have the support of CfaN and the people that you meet at CfaN. You know, the Lord might be burning in your heart, and you are on fire now, but you don't know what to do. Yeah. Nothing will happen until you take a step of faith. Yeah. You go to the website and you fill out the application, and you might not have the money. You might not know anyone. Yeah. You might not have any of the tools. Well, that is me. Yeah. Yeah. That was me. But as you take the step of faith, God will provide. Whether it's the finances, whether it's the know-how, or even as we get out, you know, since the boot camp has ended, we've been able to be involved in the Decapolis, which is coming up. And it's a lot of hands-on training. That's a beautiful thing. But also, outside of that, I've gone and I'm starting to plan a crusade. And I don't know anything, right, or anyone, but using the things that you have taught me and the staff has taught me, as I started to take steps, even what happened, the crusade director, which if you come here, you will learn that is the most important person of a crusade. It's not the evangelist, it's the crusade director, and I didn't have one, and I didn't know how to find one, but someone here at CfaN overheard me talking to you, and you weren't necessarily able to help me, but they came to me afterwards and said, hey, I might know someone who can help you. Wow. And they are helping me, and I found a crusade crusade director, and so just things like that are so priceless that you wouldn't get anywhere else.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, we trained, as part of the boot camp, we trained a dozen directors from Africa. We actually brought them over. They had some training with you guys and then some of their own as well. But this is one of the beautiful things that's happening is I envision a day where directors, evangelists, admin people will all be trained together, and they'll go out from here as complete teams. Imagine how amazing that's going to be. Now, you said something, Randy, I just want to emphasize, because you talked about if you don't even have the money yet, you know, you need to take a step of faith. And I think you mentioned the same thing, Daniel, that you need to take a step of faith. And this is really true. And I saw a lot of the questions here are about scholarships, because people say, I don't have the money. Are there opportunities for scholarships? Here's what you have to understand. This is not Bible school. We are looking to train you to go tackle giants after this. And the tuition, believe me, will be the first of many challenges to your faith. And we want you to learn to trust the Lord in these circumstances. So if you have a calling to go to the nations, to reach multitudes, let me tell you something. You're going to have to learn how to trust the Lord for financial provision. This would be a great time to start that adventure. So you can go, once again, let me just give you that website. I know it's probably on your screen, but it's CfaN, that's CFAN, bootcamp.org. That's all one word. The CFAN stands for Christ for All Nations. So CFANbootcamp.org. You can read more about it. You can find out basically everything that you want to know, including like the curriculum, the classes, the schedules, the costs, and you can even apply right there at the website. Now, this is getting a little bit longer than I intended at first. So what we're going to do is I'm going to play a video for you. This is called A Tale of Three Dreams. And this is going to give you the full picture of the vision, how boot camp fits into it, what boot camp graduates actually get involved in. And I think it's going to be a great way to just help you to get involved with this vision that I believe is going to result in hundreds of millions, maybe even billions of people hearing the gospel and coming to Christ. I hope you can join us. I hope you can be part of this. I hope we see you in January. Watch this, and we'll be back. Hello, everyone. This is Daniel Kalenda, and today I want to tell you the story of three dreams. Two of these dreams were actual literal dreams in the night. Both of them came to Reinhard Bonnke, but in two very different seasons of life. The first when he was very young, just starting out in ministry, and the other near the end of his life in ministry. The first dream is well known, the other is not, but both, I believe, are highly prophetic. And these two dreams are like golden bookends that encapsulate the life and legacy of one of God's greatest generals. But moreover, and this is the purpose of this video, they lead us to a third dream that I want to share with you in a moment, my dream. The year was 1972. Reinhard Bonnke was a 32-year-old missionary in Lesotho, a small mountainous nation landlocked by South Africa. Reinhard's ministry had been very difficult up to this point. There wasn't very much fruit. He said that on one occasion he traveled a whole day to reach a village, and when he arrived, only 5 people attended the meeting and no one got saved. His heart was troubled. He knew there must be more than this. He would cry out, "Oh Lord, this cannot be it. This cannot be the impact of the glorious gospel." It was a very difficult season in his life in ministry. But then, one night he had a dream that changed everything. He saw a gigantic map of the African continent. And as he watched, it became washed in the precious blood of Jesus from south to north and from west to east. And then he heard a mighty voice cry, "From Cape Town to Cairo, all Africa shall be saved." And he woke up. He was shaken. What a wonderful dream. But then as his logical German brain caught up with him, he thought to himself, my ministry has no impact in this tiny little nation. And now I hear all of Africa shall be saved. Something's wrong. I must have eaten some bad bananas. But Reinhard had that same dream the next night, and the next night, and the one after. And after night number 4, he said to his wife, "Annie, I think God is trying to tell me something." In response to that dream, Christ for All Nations was born. Reinhard Bonnke, together with his wife Annie and their small children, embarked on an adventure that would see millions of people come to Christ and multitudes more empowered and equipped to preach the gospel. Africa shall be saved became a battle cry for Reinhard Bonnke, and a phrase that came to be synonymous with his life and the ministry of Christ for All Nations.
I know. It's gonna be
During Reinhard's life, his ministry saw more than 75 million people come to Christ in a 30-year window just between 1987 and 2017. And by the time he died a couple of years later, that number had reached 79 million. 1 million salvations on average for every year of his life. What an amazing legacy. But you know, there are many more than 79 million souls in Africa. Not to mention the fact that many African nations, especially in the north of the continent, were not open to Reinhard Bonnke. In fact, on one scouting trip to North Africa, he was arrested, put in jail, and then deported. He also had been called to China, a little known fact, and he had a worldwide harvest in his heart, which is why he named his ministry Christ for All Nations. As fruitful as Bonnke's ministry was, surely there's a greater fulfillment yet to come. And that brings us to the second dream. In 2012, Reinhard Bonnke and I were both preaching at the BFP annual convention in Germany. In the night, he had a dream that he shared with me the next morning at breakfast, and then he repeated it that evening at the conference. He said that his dream was so real, he wasn't sure if he was asleep or awake. In fact, he didn't know if it was a dream or a vision. He said he was projected into the future where he overheard two personalities talking. They were discussing amazing things going on in the world at the time. But there was one thing of particular interest to Reinhard. One of the voices asked, "Whatever happened to Reinhard Bonnke?" The reply was this: "Oh, Reinhard Bonnke was just the forerunner of a whole generation of Holy Spirit evangelists." And then he woke up. Reinhard lived with an awareness that he needed to impart something to the next generation for the sake of this great coming harvest. And that's why he wrote books, he produced media, he held fire conferences, and he preached relentlessly. During the last few years of his life, one of his favorite themes was passing the torch to the next generation. He preached about it often as he visited many countries for the last time. And this is where we come to my dream. In 2017, the Lord began to speak to me about the upcoming decade as a decade of double harvest. I had no idea at the time that Reinhard Bonnke would pass away less than a month before the beginning of the decade. What I felt in my heart was that over the next 10 years or so, God would double the number of souls saved to well over 150 million. In other words, he would do in the next 10 years what had taken the previous 30 years combined. It would be a supernatural acceleration of the harvest in this crucial hour of history. But that double harvest is not the dream. Oh no, that acceleration will simply be the catalyst for an exponentially greater harvest, perhaps the greatest evangelistic movement the world has ever known, propelling that whole new generation of Holy Spirit evangelists into the fields before Jesus returns. Now, maybe you ask, how is this possible? Do you plan to have larger crusades than ever? Or do you plan to conduct more crusades than ever? And while we're on the subject, the answer to that is actually yes. I do believe we're going to see the largest crusades we've ever seen. And the Lord has given us some very specific direction on that. And we're already seeing a stirring on the ground in Africa as never before. Also, we are dramatically increasing the number of crusades in Africa. The most we've ever conducted in a year is 8 crusades. But in 2020, the first year of the Double Harvest strategy, we've increased to 13 crusades. The next year, it will increase again to 23 crusades. And the following year, it will nearly double again with 43 crusades in 1 year. These are CfaN gospel crusades in Africa, where I will personally preach. Now, as exciting as all of this is, the Lord showed me that this exponential increase would come not simply through addition, that is, not just because CfaN is conducting more crusades and bigger crusades, but it would come through multiplication. The 2 words the Lord gave me, the words that are ringing in my heart, the keys to seeing this dream of a worldwide harvest become a reality are these: multiply and collaborate. First, let's start with the concept of multiplication. Our strategy is simple but powerful. We're going to multiply by training, equipping, and launching thousands of evangelists. In fact, we've already been doing this on a small scale for the last couple of years. Ever since the Lord spoke to me in 2017, our ministry has reconfigured everything to accommodate this word. We've been experimenting, testing, improving, and perfecting the system that will become the incubation chamber for this multiplication. Now, I haven't talked publicly about this very much because I wanted to test these ideas first and make sure that they work. And what you may not realize is that we have already been seeing remarkable results. And now we have a tried and verified proof of concept. And so now, for the first time, we are presenting the strategy of the decade of double harvest and beyond. This is the dream burning in my heart. And I believe that once you see it, it's going to burn in your heart as well. Although we have trained thousands of students through our School of Evangelism throughout the years, in January of 2020, Christ for All Nations launched its very first Evangelism Bootcamp in Orlando, Florida. This is a 6-month, highly intense and specific training for crusade evangelism. It's much more than a school. As its name implies, it combines the intensity of a military boot camp with the focused instruction of a trade school. In boot camp, students are challenged physically, mentally, spiritually, and academically. We emphasize physical fitness, spiritual formation, character development, as well as focusing on the theological foundations of evangelism. Students are trained to preach the gospel, heal the sick, cast out demons, and bring multitudes into the experience of the Holy Spirit on crusade platforms in the third world. They learn how to preach cross-culturally, give effective altar calls, work with interpreters, and everything else needed to minister powerfully as evangelists. In addition, we teach the students all the practical skills that they simply cannot find anywhere else. Things like crusade organizing, fundraising and crusade finances, working with local pastors, follow-up with new converts, the ins and outs of international travel, how to run an evangelistic ministry, publicity and advertising, direct mail, media, television, social media, web, printing and publishing, and much, much more. The 6-month training culminates with a 3-week initiation on the field in Africa, where students will conduct hundreds of campaigns and crusades and lead hundreds of thousands of people to Christ. After graduation, these students are invited to work alongside the Christ for All Nations team worldwide to multiply the harvest over the next decade. At the moment, we offer them several levels of participation. The first area of participation for co-evangelists is what we call pre-crusade mobilization. For 6 to 7 weeks leading up to one of our mass gospel crusades, we are sending these co-evangelists into the region where our crusades are being held. They're able to go into smaller villages where our big crusades can't go. They go to markets, schools, hospitals, and prisons. They hold crusades on street corners and at football stadiums. They go to local churches and minister one-on-one everywhere they go. Just to give you an example of how this works, in 2019, we went to Nakuru in Kenya. A third of the population of the entire city showed up on the last night of our meetings there. It was amazing. But even before I arrived, for 7 weeks leading up to the crusade, we had a team of 4 evangelists on the ground preaching the gospel day in and day out. Between the 4 of them, they conducted up to 32 outreaches per day. And over those 7 weeks, prior to the crusade, they ministered in 611 outreaches and led more than 200,000 people to Christ. I believe the days are coming when more people will be saved before the crusades than during them. And not because the crusades are small, but because there's such a movement of evangelism swirling around the crusades. They actually become the catalyst for something even greater than themselves. Nakuru, Kenya, was just one of many such pre-crusade mobilization initiatives that we've conducted in several cities and countries that have resulted in hundreds of thousands of salvations. And so far, this has only been the beta test. How have we been able to get such amazing results through this pre-crusade mobilization system? We have 3 strategies. Number 1, gospel trucks. In Africa, our talented team of world-class technicians has built a fleet of custom-made mobile crusade units, affectionately known as gospel trucks. These trucks are designed for the rugged African terrain. They're able to access the most difficult areas, and we're able to preach the gospel everywhere. Now, it's important to understand that these are not just hit-and-run evangelistic outreaches. Our gospel trucks are connected with the main crusades organizing team so that each village outreach has participating churches where new converts can be connected. Ushers, counselors, they preach with interpreters. They are partnered with local pastors and sometimes even have local worship teams cooperating. These are literally smaller crusades that happen all over the place. Number 2 is school outreaches. The median age in Africa is under 20 years old. This fact, combined with the reality that most people who make a decision to follow Christ do so in their youth, makes schools a prime target for evangelism. Now, many people are under the impression that schools are off limits for the gospel, but CfaN's impeccable reputation of integrity for over 40 years of ministry in Africa has given our teams access to many thousands of schools. In Nakuru, Kenya, the city I mentioned earlier, where we saw over 200,000 salvations in 7 weeks, our team ministered in hundreds of schools. But here's the amazing part. There are over 33,000 schools in Kenya alone, and they're all open to us. But it's not just Kenya that's open. Schools in many nations across Africa are open to us. We just haven't had the time or the manpower to reach them. Now imagine if we could take the gospel to every one of those schools. It would result in many millions of salvations per year. But here's the crazy part. Even if we had the personnel to reach all of those schools in Africa, every 4 years we would have to start over because they'd be filled with a whole new group of students. This part of the vision is infinitely scalable. All we're lacking is workers. It's exactly what Jesus said. The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. The third way is one-on-one. You know, everywhere these evangelists go, they're trained to preach the gospel, heal the sick, and cast out demons. Whether they're standing on a platform in front of thousands, or talking to the waitress at a restaurant, to the staff in the hotel, a flight attendant at the airport, or people they meet on the street, everywhere they go, they are bringing the power of the gospel into people's lives. This is both organic and organized, because in addition to the normal daily encounters they have on the way, we also organize outreaches in public places where they witness one-on-one to people shopping in the markets or congregating in busy parts of town. Together, these three strategies, the gospel trucks, school outreaches, and one-on-one evangelism, guarantee that even before the first day of one of our mass gospel crusades, the region has been shaken by the power of the gospel for several weeks leading up to it. Now, this pre-crusade mobilization initiative is just one of several strategies connected to the decade of double harvest. I'm going to briefly mention three others that represent the many different ways that our co-evangelists will multiply the harvest: Operation Decapolis, standalone outreaches, and standalone crusades. The word Decapolis means 10 cities. The Operation Decapolis strategy is designed to harness the potential of the Evangelism Bootcamp graduates. Working together with these graduates, we conduct campaigns of 10 crusades in 10 cities over a 2-week period. The crusades in each city last 5 or 6 days. Our Christ for All Nations organizers, technicians, and support staff prepare these crusades with the co-evangelists who are the graduates of the boot camp. And these guys carry the majority of the ministry. Each day, I travel to a new city where a crusade is already ongoing. I preach one night in each place, and then I move on to the next. With this strategy, we are able to harness all of the tools CfaN has for conducting effective gospel crusades, while increasing the reach and scope of our work tenfold without adding any additional time or expense. It's true multiplication. Next is what I'm calling standalone outreaches. I believe that the harvest is so ripe that not only in Africa, but around the world, our village crusades, gospel trucks, school outreaches, and so on will not be limited to pre-crusade mobilization. In other words, all of the above initiatives can be carried out independent of our mass gospel crusades. We're soon going to be sending teams at all times of the year to many different regions, including other parts of the world. I envision a day that these initiatives will be ongoing every day all over the world. Finally, there are standalone crusades. Now, we've already been doing this for a long time. We've been helping students who graduated from our evangelism schools to conduct their own crusades in many different parts of the world. And we do this by offering them support in logistics, in training, in resources, even funding their crusades from time to time. And through these crusades, we have literally seen millions of people come to Christ in many places of the world without having any known connection to the CfaN name. Because you see, our primary goal is not to get the credit for the harvest, but to help push it forward in any way possible. In addition to all of this, one inevitable effect will be that many of these evangelists will launch out on their own. We're training them and equipping them to do crusade ministry, not just in theory, but in working with Christ for All Nations on the field. I cannot imagine a more effective on-the-job training opportunity. The results of this ongoing harvest will be literally incalculable. For a number of years, I've been hearing prophetic words about a 1 billion soul harvest that's coming. There was a time when I dismissed these prophecies as dramatic hyper-faith rhetoric, but not anymore. I really believe it's possible, and I want to show you just how possible it is through multiplication. Now, for those of you that are numbers people like me, consider this. If I had 2,000 evangelists, each of which was committed to 5 outreaches per year, and in each outreach they led just 10,000 people to Christ. Now, these are very conservative numbers, by the way, as we've proven over and over. But even so, that would equal 100 million people saved per year. Multiply that over 10 years, and you have 1 billion souls. And this is why, in addition to the 40-plus crusades that Christ for All Nations will be conducting each year in Africa, my goal is to raise up, train, and equip 2,000 crusade evangelists over the next decade. This is what I mean when I say that the decade of double harvest is only the beginning, a catalyst for the greatest movement of world evangelism in history. This is what I believe Reinhard dreamt about when he heard that voice saying Reinhard Bonnke was just a forerunner of a whole new generation of Holy Spirit evangelists. This is how I believe the fulfillment of the vision of a blood-washed Africa from Cape Town to Cairo and beyond will be fulfilled. Now, the other word the Lord gave me was collaborate. In the past, evangelists were seen as lone rangers who were unwilling or perhaps unable to work together. And this is changing in our time. And indeed, it must change if we're going to see this great end-time harvest reaped. I've had experiences in Africa where we needed to move crusade dates or venues because other evangelists were in the same place at the same time. We were stepping on each other because of a lack of communication. But the world is a huge place. There's no reason that we should be tripping over each other in some regions while other places are completely neglected. Imagine if rather than interfering with one another, we actually began to work together, synergizing our efforts and resources for an even greater impact. Also, in my experience, evangelists are often very lonely. One evangelist called me recently to tell me about a crusade he'd just returned from. And after many wonderful testimonies of what God had done there was a silence. He said, you know, sometimes I just feel so lonely, I don't even know who to tell about what God is doing. He said, I just needed someone to talk to. Evangelists need community just like everyone else. They need a community to belong to, and colleagues to encourage them and to hold them accountable. And this is where collaboration comes into play. As one of the most influential evangelistic ministries in the world, Christ for All Nations is committed to using that influence to help other ministries and bring evangelists together in kingdom collaborations for the sake of the harvest. Here are just 3 examples of this collaboration concept. Number 1 is the Global Evangelist Alliance, GEA. In 2017, under the umbrella of Empowered 21, CfaN was commissioned by apostolic leaders around the world to establish the Global Evangelist Alliance. In May of 2018, we brought together some of the most influential evangelists in the world to form an executive council under which there is representation from every region in the world. And we're working towards having members in every city in the world, working together and collaborating to reap the harvest. Through the Global Evangelist Alliance, ordinary men and women with a heart for the lost have access to other evangelists in the alliance all over the world. Someone with a burden for Myanmar or Peru will be able to connect with other GEA members there or anywhere else in the world. And every year, GEA leadership and members meet together for a time of inspiration, training, fellowship, and strategy. Imagine evangelists conspiring together to shake entire nations with the gospel. By bringing together men and women with the same burden and passion, we are facilitating collaborations that will result in a massive harvest. Number 2 is the Send. In February of 2018, just 3 days after the death of Billy Graham, a small group of men met right here at the Christ for All Nations headquarters in Orlando to talk about collaborating together for the sake of sparking a worldwide missions movement. Out of that meeting, the Send was born. Together with these other 6 ministries, I and Christ for All Nations comprise one of the 7 collaborators that lead the Send. Our first gathering was in Orlando in February 2018. Nearly 60,000 people, most of them youth, gathered together at Camping World Stadium for 12 hours of prayer, the preaching of the gospel, and commissioning to the mission field. As a result, more than 2,500 people received Christ, but also 5,423 committed to go to the nations as missionaries. 2,467 adopted schools to evangelize. 5,064 adopted a neighborhood to evangelize. 2,197 adopted a college campus to evangelize. 18,196 committed to fast and pray for the harvest, and hundreds enrolled in Bible schools and training centers around the world. The second gathering took place in February of 2020 in Brazil. First, we rented the largest stadium in Sao Paulo, which is the Morumbi Stadium, which seats 70,000 people. When registrations opened, it sold out in 6 hours, beating the stadium's previous record for sellout time. We decided to rent the second largest stadium in the city as well. It sold out in 3 days. So we took a leap of faith and we rented a third stadium in Brasilia, the capital. And on February 8th, I preached to 140,000 people across 3 stadiums in 2 different cities within 8 hours. While I was driving to that second stadium, I heard the Lord speak to me. He gave me the words of Amos 9:13, which says, "Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when the plowman will overtake the reaper and the treader of grapes, him that sows the seed. The mountains shall drip sweet wine, and all the hills shall flow with it." In Brazil, we saw 7,800 people give their lives to Christ. But in addition, 44,326 committed to fast and pray for 40 days. 50,141 committed to immerse themselves in the Bible in 2020. 10,916 adopted a university to evangelize. 6,949 adopted a school to evangelize. 18,476 committed to go to the nations as missionaries. Now the send has only begun, and we are heading to other cities and other nations in the world in the days to come. We're believing God to send workers into the harvest. This is just one more way that we are working to obey the word, to collaborate. Number 3 is the Christ for All Nations Evangelism Alliance. Christ for All Nations has held dozens of schools of evangelism in many different nations of the world. Now, with Bootcamp and other training initiatives, the community of evangelists that belong to the CfaN family has grown into the thousands. We offer these graduates the opportunity to remain connected to CfaN for ongoing training, resourcing, and collaboration. This happens through the Christ for All Nations Evangelism Alliance. Now, here's what all this means to me personally. I became the successor of Reinhard Bonnke when I was just 28 years old. It's an understatement to say that I felt unqualified and out of my depth. At times I wondered why God had chosen me for this job, and I didn't ask for this assignment. I never even saw it coming. Never once have I believed that God put me in this position for my own personal benefit, and I didn't inherit this ministry because of any family relation. I've never felt entitled to it, nor do I believe that my calling is just to maintain Reinhard Bonnke's ministry for another 50 years. I can remember on more than one occasion, Reinhard, while preaching a sermon, stopping mid-sentence, turning to me, sitting on the front row, pointing his finger at me and saying in a commanding tone, "Daniel, you are not to become the custodian of my legacy. Preach the gospel." What he was saying, and what he did say many times, was that he had no desire just to perpetuate his ministry for the sake of his legacy. That was not why we are here. No, in this next season, God will use this incredible platform Reinhard and Annie Bonnke and many others spent a lifetime building to launch that new generation of Holy Spirit evangelists into the nations. In conclusion, here is my invitation to you. There are a few things in this life that are truly worthwhile. As John reminds us, the world is passing away along with its desires, but whoever does the will of God abides forever. What is the will of God? Peter makes it clear that God is not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. And there is nothing dearer to the heart of God than souls. Daniel said, "Those that turn many to righteousness will shine like the stars forever and ever." If you've been looking for something to invest in that pays eternal dividends, I can imagine no better investment in this world. Leonard Ravenhill said, "The opportunity of a lifetime must be seized during the lifetime of the opportunity." I believe the harvest that lies before us is not only the opportunity of a lifetime, but the opportunity of the ages. And I want to invite you to stand with us and seize this moment for Calvary's sake. I'm asking you to make a commitment that for the next 10 years, for the next decade, the decade of double harvest, you will stand with Christ for All Nations to see this massive harvest come in. Would you do that? Would you stand with us? Here are 3 ways that we need your help. Number 1 is pray. We need your prayers. You know, we are in a very real battle, and there is very real resistance. We are pressing forward with all the grace that God has given us, but we need your prayers for the CfaN team and our families spread out around the world with offices in 12 countries and 6 continents. Number 2 is serve. Some of you may be called to join this army of evangelists being sent out into the harvest fields. Maybe you know someone who's called into mass crusade evangelism. I know of no better way to launch them than through the Christ for All Nations training, and especially the Bootcamp. You can find out more about it on the website on your screen. And number 3 is give. Our urgent need at the moment is for a training facility. We're utilizing our offices in Orlando at the moment, but because of space constraints, we've only been able to accept 50 students out of hundreds of applicants. We need to take the lid off quickly if we're going to be able to fulfill this vision that God has given us. There are also a number of other highly strategic ways that you can give toward the harvest, from sponsoring students in need to the purchasing of gospel trucks to the financing of crusades. We need your help. To see how you can sow into the harvest, visit the website on your screen. You know, years ago, we used to sing a song by Robert Critchley that said, "We are dreamers of impossible dreams, walking by faith in what is yet unseen. Number us, Lord, with those that dare to believe that we can live in your impossible dream." Little did I know back then how important it would be to see what is yet unseen and to take hold of these God dreams by faith. And I believe that we can see the impossible become possible in our day. We can live this impossible dream for the glory of God and for the sake of souls. Thank you for standing with us. The best is yet to come.